Today I'm going to talk about something completely different. I've never given a talk on this exact subject before. It started as kind of an interest of mine when I started studying the health of forgiveness, and then I just started accumulating articles and reading books and reading chapters in textbooks, and I've kind of developed it. And then came several months ago when there was kind of a call for a talk, and also I like doing PowerPoints. So I started doing a PowerPoint on the health of forgiveness, and there was a call for presenters, and I said, you know what, I'll throw it out there. So I've given this talk once before last week. I'm giving it today, and I'm giving it next week, and there seems to be some interest in this topic. So going forward, I have 40 years of practice as a family physician, a lot of family practice, and a lot of OMT. I haven't seen patients in 4 years. I'm currently a National Medical Director with Healthcare Services Corporation. So what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about understanding forgiveness, the physical health benefits of being a forgiving person, mental and emotional well-being associated with being a forgiving person, and strategies for practicing forgiveness. So what does Nelson Mandela say? Nelson Mandela says, resentment is like drinking poison and hoping it will kill your enemies. And if ever there was a person who had a reason for resentment, it was Nelson Mandela. And he had this thought about forgiveness. Has anyone ever seen the movie Inside Out? Okay. Inside Out is a really fun movie, and it talks about the inner workings of a little girl's brain and how there's this control center in her brain, and there's all this chatter in her brain and all this conversation going on in her brain. And that there's books, and actually before I started learning about forgiveness, I started studying the inner conversation because I was wondering if I was normal, because I have an inner conversation all the time. I'm constantly talking to myself. I'm constantly have this kind of inner chatter, and then I started talking to other people, and it seems like pretty much everybody has some form of inner conversation going on. So what is it? It's the noise that can keep us from being present. It's distracting. It's thoughts that won't turn off. The spinning mind that won't let me sleep. For years and years, I'd say to people, how do you sleep? Well, I can't sleep because my brain won't turn off. I have thoughts that are coming, constantly. Anxiety over future events. Being upset or depressed about past events. This is the inner conversation. But it can also be good. We can have hopeful stuff. We can have a grandchild on the way. We can have a vacation on the way. We can be thinking about that too. So what's forgiveness? I had several different examples of what I was going to use for my story about forgiveness, and I picked this one. So if you remember the biblical story of Joseph. So Joseph had brothers and his father, and Joseph was the favorite son. Remember the story about the coat of many colors? Joseph was the favorite son, and his brothers didn't like it. And at some point, given the opportunity, his brothers sold him into slavery, and a long series of events came about. And then Joseph rose to a man of great power. And in front of him, when he was in Egypt and he was a man of great power, his brothers came before him. And Joseph had an opportunity for revenge. He had an opportunity to get even. He had an opportunity to teach him a lesson. He had vengeance possible. And what did he choose? He chose forgiveness. So then I thought, well, what did he get out of that path? The vengeance path versus the forgiveness path. Well, he got his brothers back. He got his family back. He got his father back. And he got to be a great man who was now in a position of power. And there are some interpretations of this story that even said Joseph had some amount of gratitude, because not for the opportunity granted him by being sold into slavery and then rising to greatness, how would he have ever gotten to the point he was at? So what is the thing that needs to be forgiven? So it's the grievance. So generally the grievance has two elements. Either something happened that you didn't want to happen, or something that didn't happen you wish would have happened. So when we have a grievance and we're chatting in our brain about the inner conversation, we create a grievance story. And this is pretty well talked about. So what's a grievance story? It's something that happened. We replay it in our head frequently. It's constantly, this story is being replayed. So we can have emotional upset and feel physical symptoms, and it happens all the time. We can be worried about something and start sweating. Our blood pressure can go up. Our muscles can tense up. We can try to attach our shoulders to our necks. Our body tension goes up. You look at somebody, you go, man, you look very tense. Well, they may be thinking about something. They may be replaying the grievance story, looking for people to tell the story to. When I was doing this lecture, my wife and I are in the Costco, and we're checking out, and I'm putting stuff on the belt, and the woman behind my wife decides now is the time to tell my wife a grievance story. So my wife is completely wrapped up in this woman's story. I'm putting the stuff on the belt, and she got the story completely out by the time we had checked out. And I thought, wow, I wonder how often that story comes. The story will frequently have a villain. It will evolve over time. It's kind of like the fish you didn't catch. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And it reminds you of a painful event or a painful time. So then I thought, okay, I need to have a personal example of a story of something that happened to me, something I thought about for a long time, something that really bothered me, a grievance story of mine, and this is what I came up with. July 14th, 1988. So why do I remember that date really well? My son, my first child, was born July 15th, 1988. The day before he's born, I get served with papers that I'm being sued. And I'm upset. I had just started practice, and I'm like, what is this? What's happening? I'm concerned. It was a case of a delay of diagnosis of a cervical spine injury. And believe this happened in 1987, so there weren't CAT scanners in hospitals. I had a guy who had come into the hospital. He was in a car accident, really big guy. He had cough syncope. He passed out from coughing. He hurt his neck. He was cleared by the trauma team. He had x-rays that was normal. He didn't have a CAT scan. We didn't even have a CAT scanner in the hospital. Later on, he wound up having a CAT scan. But in any case, he said because of this delay of diagnosis, because it took an extra month or two to figure out he had a cervical spine fracture, he was permanently injured. He couldn't use his arm. He sues me, and his wife sues me for $1 million, and I'm worried. I'm going to tell you, I'm worried. I'm thinking about this a lot. $1 million each. So this is what happened. I said to my attorney, I go, he's not that hurt. I said, his fracture never moved. I said, he's not that hurt. Why don't we videotape him? So there's the good part of the story. So they videotaped him. So this is 1989 maybe at this point. They videotape this guy who can't move his arm, whose wife is suing me. They videotape him. He got a job doing lawn care, and he's got this gas-powered weed whacker. And the darn thing wouldn't start. So with his arm that wouldn't function, he's going like this. And they caught him doing it 30 times in 2 minutes because it wouldn't start. They also caught him mowing a lawn with no shirt and a cigarette hanging out of his mouth. Really good. These are the days where people didn't really have video like this. But they catch him at it, and I'm like, let's go to court. I'm excited about it. My attorney calls me, says his attorney quit. He's got another lawyer who doesn't even do malpractice, and we're giving him $25,000. I'm like, why? We're good, we're good. We've got this great case. They go, cost of defense, they paid the guy, and I was just beside myself upset. Okay, so that's my grievance story. I'll tell you more about it later. What does Gandhi say? Gandhi says, the weak can never forgive. Forgiveness is an attribute of the strong. So one of the things I've realized is that forgiveness really isn't like weakness. It's really not giving in. It's really not losing an argument. It's kind of a strength. And we'll get into that a little more. So rumination. So rumination's got two big meanings. It's got one meaning like what cows and sheep do when they chew on things over and over again. In psychology, rumination's got a really much different meaning. repetitive, persistent focus on negative thoughts. So I ran into a classmate of mine who I haven't seen in 40 years last night. And I was talking to her about this lecture, and she goes, my mother is a ruminator. Her mother is 92 years old and still talks about, her mother was a twin, her mother still talks about how her twin was the preferred daughter. At 92, she's still got it in her head. And how many people have you seen that, are elderly and are still ruminating over things that happened 50 years ago or more? It's just in the front of their head. It's in a big space in their brain. So one of the things I was reading about is giving space to the grievance. So where are we going to store the grievance? Where are we going to put the grievance? So are we going to give it the room with the best view in our house? Are we going to give the grievance the penthouse? Are we going to rent too much space to the grievance? Or can we maybe find a way to store the grievance a little, to put the grievance in a slightly different spot, or put the grievance in a spot where maybe it doesn't have to be in the front of our mind constantly? So repeated emphasis on the grievance story and the association of the grievance with physical pain and emotional pain. So here's more about the WE story. So it's done. I mean, there's really nothing more for me to do about this. The case settled, but in my head, I'm keeping it alive. So I did some bad things. I remained upset. I gave the story the penthouse of my brain. I thought about it too much. I kept every single record that pertained to that medical liability case. Like 3-ring binders full of stuff. And the worst thing I did was, I remember I told you about the videotape. So I had these VHS tapes of this guy pulling the weed whacker, smoking while, mowing the lawn. I kept those videotapes because somebody someday is going to want to see them. And guess where I kept them? I kept them in my nightstand drawer because I knew I couldn't lose these things. And so every time I opened up my nightstand drawer, I'm like, there it is. I got to think about this again. So it was a constant reminder. By the way, no one ever asked to see any of this stuff. I wrote up a summary of what happened, and nobody seems to have ever cared. Martin Luther King. I wish I had a tape of him saying this. We must develop and maintain the capacity to forgive. He who is devoid of the power to forgive is devoid of the power to love. There is some good in the worst of us and some evil in the best of us. When we discover this, we are less prone to hate our enemies. Super interesting philosophy. So what is forgiveness? So let's talk about what it's not. It's not condoning the behavior. We don't have to say that we condone this behavior or we're okay with what happened. We don't have to say any of that. It's not forgetting because that's impossible to forget. It's not excusing it, it's not minimizing it, and it's not denying it. Now here's something. It does not have to involve contact with the victim or the villain. There doesn't have to be this moment where you go to somebody and you say, I am requesting your forgiveness, or I am giving you my forgiveness. That doesn't have to happen. And sometimes it's really not even a good idea. Sometimes not even possible. So if the person feels like that moment of meeting with somebody, of reconciling with somebody, of maybe getting over it, of maybe talking it out, of maybe giving forgiveness or asking forgiveness can lead to a renewed, valuable relationship. Well, maybe it's not a bad idea. And maybe it's something to think about, but not necessary. It does not have to involve reconciliation. That's just what I saw. And it doesn't involve giving it up. It really is just getting it out of the penthouse forefront of your brain. So what kind of forgiveness is there? Well, there's personal forgiveness, and I'm going to tell a story about that. Forgiving yourself. Maybe there's something we've done in our lives, all of us have. We wish we wouldn't have done it. We wish we would have done it differently. We had just haven't forgiven ourselves. We are our own worst critic, that expression. We're our own worst critic. Interpersonal forgiveness. Dealing with somebody else, forgiving or asking forgiveness of someone else. Societal forgiveness. We have whole groups of people who don't like whole groups of other people nowadays. And it's honestly, I'm 68 years old. I feel like that's getting worse. There's groups of people who don't like other groups of people. So what do you get out of it? You can feel better about yourself. You can have better relationships and better relationship qualities. You can have more relationships. A lot of times people who are grievance keepers wind up with smaller and smaller and smaller personal networks. What does the Dalai Lama say? By the way, you're wondering how I got all these quotes. If you Google search forgiveness quotes by famous people, there's pages of them. And I'm thinking, my God, there's hundreds of them. So I picked the big hitters, like the Dalai Lama. All major religions carry basically the same message: love, compassion, and forgiveness. So does forgiveness have to involve religion? No, but it can. So what do you get from forgiveness? One, you recognize it, see it for what it is, observe it, process it, develop maybe more empathy, like what Martin Luther King says, there's good and evil in all of us. Maybe develop more empathy and releasing it. So here's a story. So for years and years, I saw this guy, Ray. And Ray would always say, I'm going to visit my daughter. I'm back from my daughter. My daughter wants me to move there. I'm going to see my daughter. And it was a big deal for him, and we talked about it a lot. And I kept saying, why don't you just go live with your daughter? She wants you. His daughter kept saying, I want you to move here. I want you to be with you. I want you to move up here. So for years and years, he would talk about moving to Salt Lake City, from Mesa, Arizona, Salt Lake City, to see his daughter. One day I'm seeing him, and I'm just busy. I said, Ray, I'm going to call you when I stop seeing patients. I won't be busy. We'll talk as long as you want. But he was just sad, and he left. So I call him up the end of the day. He doesn't pick up the phone. I go, oh, for God's sakes, he's not picking up. So now I'm really worried. I'm like, oh my God, I sent this guy home. I was too busy. I'm feeling bad about it. So I look up his address, and I go to his house. Ray comes out, and I look at him. I'm not really proud of this part of the story. So I said to him, Ray, what the hell? I said, you promised you'd pick up the phone. Really worried about you. But now we're in his driveway. So I'm standing there with this guy. I could picture it. Mesa, Arizona. There's cactuses in the driveway. I'm talking to this guy, and I said, Ray, what is it? What is it? What's happening here? And he goes, I didn't raise my daughter. I was like, wow. So I said, what happened? He goes, well, I got divorced. She stayed in Salt Lake City. I moved to Mesa, and another man raised my daughter. And it was a big thing. You could tell when somebody says a big thing to you. He said a big thing. He goes, another man raised my daughter. And I said, so that's what this is about. I said, you feel guilt because another man raised your daughter. And we're both kind of coming to this realization. I'm not sure he fully realized it either, but we're both kind of coming to this together. And then I said to him, but Ray, she wants something from you that she never had. That's what this is about for her. She's always wanted this relationship with you. And if you don't do it now, then she's never going to have what she wanted. And that was kind of like, we talked for a while, but that's kind of what I said then. It was better than my opening, which was, Ray, what the hell? About a month later, I get this note. Thanks to you, on my way to Utah, and family. Thank you so much, Ray. And I kept this note, and I thought, he never forgave himself. It was a big deal. Patty Duke talks about toughest to forgive ourselves, best start with other people. I threw this in from my dad. I'm not sure it pertains to this lecture at all, but I wanted to throw in a quote from my dad. Gray hair is hereditary, you get it from your children. So physical symptoms of not forgiving. All these sayings, I can't stomach this. You're hurting my heart. You're making my head explode. I'm worried sick. How many people have you seen in your careers that are worried sick? Here's an osteopathic concept. sympathetic hypertonia and forgiveness. So we all know the sympathetic nervous system effects: increased heart rate, increased sweating, increased tension in our muscles. Great tool to have if you've got an emergency. But you shouldn't have a physical emergency when you're thinking an emotional thought. If you're thinking about something and your heart rate goes up and you start sweating and your muscles are tensing and your shoulders are trying to attach to your ears and your neck hurts and your head hurts and you're like, this is sympathetic hypertonia. And it's an osteopathic concept. It's normalization of sympathetic hypertonia. I spent a lot of time doing OMT in my life. I was board certified in family practice in OMT. And a lot of times what we were combating was sympathetic hypertonia, excessive sympathetic tone. That's I.M. Core. You probably saw some of his works. Blood pressure can reduce with forgiveness therapy. Practicing forgiveness therapy can lower blood pressure. What do you get? Reduced stress, lower inflammation. It's actually measurable. In some of the articles I give you, you can see this, but it's actually measurable that biomarkers can improve. Chronic pain and the grievance. So how many people have you seen that have chronic pain connected to emotional pain? Lots and lots. The lack of sleep, the emotional tension, the chronic pain, and if we can get into a place of forgiveness and not hold on to bitterness and grief, can we get better coping skills? Can we get decreased pain? Can we get psychological benefits? Can we have a bigger network? So this book talks about forgiveness therapy, and they quoted a Dr. Paul Komen, and this is kind of what he talked about, is that he was a marriage therapist, and he's seen this couple that he's seen many, many times. And during the course of these sessions, these marital therapy sessions, they basically were arguing their old fights and back and forth. And then Dr. Coleman said to them something to the effect of, you should try to forgive each other. And that was an interesting concept. They came back to him and said, we've actually tried to forgive each other. So we never really talk about marriage, but what bigger relationship do you have in your life than your marriage? I mean, it's kind of like so today is actually my 40th anniversary of meeting my wife. And we got married a year and 2 days later. So in 2 days, we'll have our 39th wedding anniversary. Forgiveness in a marriage is really important because you can tell, this is just my theory, now this is not scientific, and you can tell a marriage that hasn't got any forgiveness because they could never have a small argument. You can't argue about where to go to dinner or where to go on vacation or where to do this or where to do that, because even the smallest arguments will bring up the big arguments. Even the smallest arguments will bring up the you never, you always, you did this file cabinet of stuff. Oh yeah? Well, you never, and before you know it, you're reliving a 30-year-old argument that you've had plenty of times. If you can have forgiveness in a marriage, I think the marriage is better. That's just maybe my opinion, but he talks about it in this book. So what do you get out of forgiveness is you can actually get longevity because you can get better social integration. So one of the things I noticed in family practice is that people with bigger support, bigger social networks, bigger groups of people who care about them tend to live longer. And this is proven to be true. So we live longer if there's more people supporting us, if there's more people checking on us. When I was in practice, I had this mathematical rule, is that the length of the visit was directly proportionate to the number of daughters in the room. So if there was one daughter, it was going to be longer. If there was two daughters, it was going to be longer. If there was three daughters, you might as well skip lunch because they're going to start arguing with each other. So the amount of people who are checking in, the amount of people who are caring, the amount of people dragging you to the doctor, I mean, how many people have you seen they're in the doctor's office because somebody made them come? That's a social integration of it. Mother Teresa, that's a good one, huh? If we really want to love, we must learn how to forgive. Mental and emotional well-being, reduction in anxiety and depression with forgiveness therapy. So what do we get? We get self-compassion, healthier self-evaluations, sustained work gains. We get better relationship quality. Maybe we learn to resolve conflicts a little better. We have empathy, and we get that social support, and that's so critical, to have that social support with aging. I mean, how many people have you seen that are just alone as they age? They just have no social support. I mean, I used to call people, because Mesa, Arizona was really my main practice area. And a lot of people had moved to Mesa, from the Midwest and from other areas, and they had moved to Mesa and their family was somewhere else. So how many people have you seen with just little or no social support, little or no social network? And it's just critically important, as people age, to have that. So here's a quote: "Almost everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes, including you." Practical strategies for practicing forgiveness. So for one thing, maybe releasing this perceived unfairness, getting rid of the fear of vulnerability, not thinking that forgiveness is weakness, because forgiveness is definitely not weakness. Forgiveness is tough stuff. But I think if you can somehow forgive, then maybe you don't have to relive it over and over and over again. So one is acknowledge the offense. Process your emotions, make a conscious decision to forgive, releasing resentment, and practice growth exercises. Really harder to do than say. Really hard to do this, but it's important if we can do it. Integrating it into everyday life. I mean, I've always really benefited from walking in the woods. It's good for me. I don't know what it is, but I always know I'm better if I go walking in the woods. Sustaining our well-being. Here's the other point of view. JFK, forgive your enemies, but never forget their names. So this is the opposing point of view. And here's really the opposing point of view. Anybody remember this movie? Kill Bill? No. Anyway, this is the opposite point of view. Uma Thurman in this movie did not practice forgiveness. She practiced revenge. So revenge is a dish best served cold. So when I was preparing this lecture, I talked to my daughter and I said, I don't know what it is, but I'm going to do all these lectures on forgiveness. And she says to me, are you going to do the forgiveness prayer? So even when my kids were little, every year I would say a form of this prayer to them. I hereby forgive all who have hurt me, all who have wronged me, whether deliberately or inadvertently, whether by word or by deed, may no one be punished on my account. And then I would say it to them though, I want you to forgive me, whether I did it this way or did it that way. I want you to forgive me, and I want to forgive you for anything you have done. Now, when they were little kids, they kind of barely paid attention. When they were teenagers, they got snarky about it. They would say, ditto dad, or something like that, or yeah, all right. I think they would, now that they're in their 30s and they have kids of their own, I think they would be truly disappointed if I didn't do this with them. So my daughter goes, are you gonna do the prayer? I'm like, yeah, I'll do the prayer. I'll throw it in for you. So forgiveness as a family trait. So what do we teach our kids? If we come from a family of grudge holders, where our part of the family can't talk to that part of the family, where this, and I've seen this plenty of times in my own family, where this uncle can't talk to that uncle, so this wife can't talk to that wife, and their kids can't get together because there's this argument and this grievance here and this grievance there. So forgiveness, grudge holding can be a family trait, and we can learn to be forgiving examples to our children. We can learn to be forgiving families, or we can learn to be grudge holders. We can learn to hang on to things. So there's this song, we're almost ready. There's this song, I remember this commercial when we were kids. It's called You've Got to Be Taught. And when I started searching it out, I'm like, that would be good. And I started searching it out. It turns out it's from South Pacific. And I didn't really realize it was from South Pacific, but I remember it from this commercial on TV. So we're gonna take I didn't do it really well embedding it, but we're gonna take a shot at playing the song from South Pacific.
What makes her talk like that? Why do you have this feeling, you and she? I do not believe it is born in you. I do not believe it.
It's not born in you. It happens after you're born.
You've got to be taught to hate and fear. You've got to be taught from year to year. It's got to be drummed in your dear little ear. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught to be afraid of people whose eyes are oddly made, and people whose skin is a different shade. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught before it's too late, before you are 6 or 7 or 8. To hate all the people your relatives hate. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be carefully taught.
Isn't that something? You're very fortunate that played because I was about to sing it. Thank you, Matthew, for doing that. Appreciate it. This is probably the best book I read. For Gift for Good, Dr. Fred Luskin, he's a psychologist. He talked about a lot of this stuff that I just talked about the grievance story, about holding on to anger, holding on to grievance, holding on to bitterness, and also maybe thinking about things differently, maybe thinking about not giving the grievance such a great rental space. And so if you're gonna read one book, I would say this is a really good book. And then the breath of thanks technique, you've probably done stuff like this before, but if we can take maybe 15, 20 seconds and do at least one round of it. So the breath of thanks technique, it's, how many things do you see that involve breathing? People say, wait a minute, take a breath. Talking about just distracting yourself, calming yourself, using the breath of thanks technique. So if you want to even do it, we can stop multitasking, turn your brain off for a second, and we can just do it. And what we'll do is we'll breathe in very slowly, very evenly for 7 seconds. We'll hold it for 3 seconds, and we'll breathe out really slowly, really evenly. Try to avoid and, really just even breathing. So kind of close your eyes and we'll do it together. I won't do it because I'll be talking, but try to breathe in slowly for a count of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Hold it in, 1, 2, 3, and let it out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And do that, so I won't do it a lot of times here, but do that 3 times. It's amazing what it'll do for you. I get really nervous when I'm about to get my blood pressure checked. And the medical assistant did this to me. I'm like, oh, why didn't I think of that? It's really calming to maybe just take a breath. Really just take a minute. In yoga classes, they do this. So what do you get? You get physical health, mental well-being, better social relationships, and you could practice these kind of strategies. So how did my grievance story end? And it went on for a long time. I'm saying I thought about this a lot for well over 20 years. It ended by me letting it go. I decided enough already. Nobody cares about this. It happened a really long time ago. Nobody really cared about it. And I took a few steps. One, I threw out all the stuff I had that nobody had looked at. I threw out this giant binder of medical records. I threw out the videotapes that were in my nightstand drawer. I threw them out. And I will tell you, the mere act of throwing that stuff out was really cleansing to me. I don't know why, but I just held on to that stuff forever, and I realized I don't need it, they don't need it. And honestly, when I was thinking about a grievance story that I could tell, I had to remember that I had this. This hasn't been on my mind in a long time. So what do you get? You can develop an attitude of gratitude. You can maybe think about the things that are more positive in your life, the things that you're grateful for, the things that you're really, okay, I've got one more quick story. I'll make it quick. Things you can be grateful for. So 2010, I'm having a pretty good day. 2010, I'm having a pretty good day. Right after dinner, I ate an ice cream bar and I got bad pain. My abdomen basically went crazy. Threw up in the car all the way to the hospital, spent 34 days in the hospital. I had necrotizing pancreatitis. I had 2 stones lodged in my common bile duct. I had double pneumonia. I had ARDS. I was intubated for weeks. I mean, I was pretty sick. I barely survived it, and I did survive it. I mean, thank goodness, because a lot of great things have happened in my life since then. I got to see grandkids, you know, for the first thing on top of my head. But I was grateful for it, and I said, you know what, I'm going to be more grateful. I'm going to really change my attitude. I was working crazy hours. I was way too overweight. And I really adopted this kind of attitude of gratitude. And then I started thinking, you know, about this other part of it. So maybe adding gratitude and forgiveness and these kind of things can work together. Okay, here's another story. I had this patient who I took care of for years, and she was together. I mean, she always looked perfect. She had this great job. In Mesa, they built the Apache helicopters. She was a big wig building Apache helicopters. She was a big supervisor. She had a doctorate. She was a leader. She was retiring. And I was talking to her, and I said, I'd known her pretty well, and I said, how did you do it? You know, I mean, you did all these things in your life, and you did it being deaf. And she was a great lip reader. I mean, she just had it. And this is what she said to me. This is all she said to me. She said, whatever you focus on will grow. And that's all she said. And I thought, huh, okay. So that kind of spinning in my head for a while. And I thought, what did she really focus on? She focused on her fitness, her leadership, her family, her education. And then a while later, I thought about it again, and I thought, this might not be good. I thought, what if you focus on regret? What if you focus on anger? What if you focus on the grievance story? What about fear and hate? Guaranteed, you focus on this kind of stuff, and this kind of stuff will grow. It can't help but grow, because whatever has your attention has your direction. So if you're focusing on negativity, your negativity will grow. It just has to. What if you focus on gratitude? What if you focus on resilience? What if you focus on grit, pride, health? If you say, you know what, I'm going to be healthy, I'm really going to focus on it, you'll probably get healthier. If you want to, learn the business of medicine, you get an MBA, you'll get smarter at that kind of stuff. So whatever you put your mind to, whatever you study, whatever you focus on is guaranteed to grow. So here's a quote. There is nobility in compassion, a beauty in empathy, and a grace in forgiveness. That was really, I thought, what a good quote. I'm going to find his book. So I actually read a book by him because I thought, that's really well put. So thank you for allowing me to do this. If you didn't find it helpful, I ask your forgiveness. I understand this is easier said than done, and it's just something to think about. That's kind of what all I really wanted to do was give everybody something to think about, maybe something to mull over. And here's some of the references. Absolutely the best thing I read in kind of preparing for this and in kind of like my hobby of figuring this stuff out was this thing, the top one. Rakel Integrative Medicine. There's a chapter in the back on forgiveness, and I thought, this is the best thing I've ever read. It's really smart, it's really concise, it's really well referenced, and it's really good. Also, there's articles on the American Psychological Association, Forgiveness and Well-Being. There's Ask the Mayo Expert. The book I mentioned, Forgive for Good, Forgiveness Therapy. So anyway, so that's kind of the references. I'm pointing out the references because I think they're really good things to read. All right, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.